Hello, and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel. And I am very happy to welcome my guest today, who is Pam Carruthers. Hello, Pam.
Hello there, Anna. Nice to meet you very much.
I I saw that you were giving a talk at a seminar
Mhm.
for the Brighton Astrology Circle
Mhm.
about astrology and magic. And I thought, ooh, nobody's been on to talk about that before.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Thank you.
Graciously agreed to come on and talk about this fascinating subject with us
Mhm.
today. So maybe it would be good to get a sense of what the connections are between astrology and magic. The connection might be there in some people's minds, but most of us practicing astrology are are very far from seeing it as magic.
Well, first of all, I was asked to give this talk, and I had to look it up. Exactly that. What is the definition? And quite rightly, a lot of people will go, "Oh, yeah, they were oh, magic. Oh dear, yeah." And then I started thinking, "Oh, this is quite an interesting subject." And my first thought went to the tarot, the magician and the tarot. And then my second thought went to the magi, the three wise men, following the star. So I started my talk talking about the birth chart of Jesus Christ, of which there are many charts. And the more I got into that, and then I went to a hairdresser who mentioned Harry Potter to me. Oh, yes, of course. Harry Potter is all about magic. Yeah. So, and I know that J.K. Rowling is, and she does know astrology. There's a lot of links here. And another definition of magic and astrology, I've got a book on the magic of astrology, by the way, by Gareth Knight. And it says it's the world of the imagination. I think that sounds rather good. And images, yeah, creativity. My whole life has been about creativity. So I looked up this chart of the birth of Christ, of which there are many charts. And then one of those charts really resonated for me. And the more I got into the subject, the more I could see like correlations, mainly to do with the sign of Pisces, and happens to be my midheaven in my own birth chart. So that chart shows this chart is by Percy Seymour, and it shows what is the three wise men following the star, the whole story, and they're following the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn visible in the night sky just after sunset. And that set me off on that journey of the Magi, of the magician. And I have it in front of me, of course, to refer to. And and again, all these charts that I looked at had that symbol, those connections to the sign of Pisces. And Pisces, as we all know, is the last sign of the zodiac. It is. And I work with both Western and Vedic astrology, both. So I love working, saying, oh, what's that relationship? Now, this chart is 7 BC. So it was only after I'd given my talk on magic that I realized, well, actually, the tropical and the sidereal zodiacs would have been the same back then. They're not different. It's like, hey, just that realization. As I think as astrologers, that's what happens for us. We go beyond the technical side of it, or the what I call scientific, and something else happens. And I like the book, The Eagle and the Lark, if you know Bernadette Brady's book. You learn your subject and then something else can take away, you can soar like the eagle. So that the three wise men, this chart, I'll tell you when it is because it's quite useful. 15th of September, 7 BC. Set for Bethlehem at 6:30 in the evening. Percy Seymour's chart he's come up with. And we have a whole group of planets. Well, first of all, the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter in Pisces, opposite the Sun and Pluto, as it happens, in Virgo. So Virgo, the Virgin Mary, this is a chart that speaks to me, that captures my imagination. It does. And then we have planets in Scorpio. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 planets in Scorpio. So the more I got into the magic or the magicians, the charts, I kept seeing Pisces again and again. And then, of course, the opposite sign of Virgo, the same. And the combination of the question of what would astrology be with magic? Is it Mercury? Is it Jupiter? But of course, those two signs are, in terms of left brain, right brain, that's what Jupiter is. It goes higher, and then you get the detail with Mercury. Do you have planets in Pisces, Anna?
No, I have a very strong Neptune, but no planets in Pisces.
All right. Well, it's the same. In many ways, it's the same. That's right. And also something that occurred again and again, and it's one of those things I often tell a client that they don't know about, is the galactic center. It's it's quite large, it's around 26 degrees of Sagittarius. The chart that Percy Seymour's come up with happens to have the midheaven at the galactic center. How come he did this? I don't know if he's still alive, but I'd like to know more how he came up with this chart. And then when I look at the Vedic symbolism, I see that those 2 planets in in Pisces, are a lunar mansion called Revati. And Revati is one of my favorites. Revati is to do with the shepherd. And what more better description than Jesus Christ as a shepherd, and the Lamb of God as well. And I was working at the Cornerstone Community Centre. Many times I've seen it. And there's a stained glass, and in that stained glass, there is Jesus. There's a dove above him, and there's a lamb at his feet. And I've seen that stained glass many times until only 2 weeks ago, here it is. So it's like the chart of this birth of Christ. Take it or leave it, but it speaks to me. The world of the imagination. And magic is almost not quite in that word of imagination, but certainly creativity. And that's why I believe very much, I do believe, that astrology takes us into some other realm. And ritual is an interesting thing about magic. And every time, I don't know about you, but I'm sure it is the same for you. Every time I look at a chart, I'm exploring, I'm going into somebody else or some other event. It's a ritual. And I started to learn astrology by hand drawing charts. Oh dear. Did you do the same?
Oh, yes.
Yes, it's isn't it? It's one of those tests. I did pass, but my goodness, mathematics, of course, is one of the foundations of astrology. It is. So that, as I said, that set me on this quest. And I looked at people such as Marcello Ficino, in front of me. He was a Neptune Jupiter man. So the thing about Neptune, but Jupiter again and again and again, I kept saying Neptune or Jupiter or Saturn, all but very much Virgo or Pisces or Sagittarius or Gemini. Those are the 4 beautiful signs that I believe are very much connected to the magic or the magicians. And as I said, I love the tarot as well.
I just want to take you back to what you said about magic and the imagination. Because it's not something that most people would think of. It's not a connection that people would normally make. When they think of magic, they think about ritual, they think about anything but imagination. Because when we think about imagination, there is this connotation of something that's not real. It
Mm-hmm.
happens in your head, and it doesn't happen in the actual tangible world. But in my other podcast, In the Light Growing Your Soul, where I have interviewed a number of mediums,
All right.
they all talk about how the imagination is the portal.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not about,
Mm-hmm.
it's not about the imagination not being real. And as a hypnotherapist, of course, you know, people say, oh, did that really happen?
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that we've been trained to believe that what's in our heads, because of its subjective nature, cannot be real.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that nebulous world, um, that Neptune world,
Yes.
Pisces, which is actually very dreamlike.
Mm-hmm.
But anyone who's had bad dreams knows that they can have an emotional hangover for most of the day.
Oh yes, I so know.
And
I so
equally,
know
having a really good dream
that. Mm-hmm.
and help you feel, you know, really, really happy first thing in the morning.
Yes.
So there is that. I think if we get stuck on this notion of what's real and what's not
Mm-hmm.
real, it gets very confusing,
Mm-hmm.
because ultimately what is real is what we experience. And what we experience is our thoughts, our beliefs, which are, in fact, created by our emotions.
I'm just about to say the same. Yes.
And it's
Yes.
you know, any psychologist is going to tell you that the subconscious driver is emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to get away from that and just see it as objective, subjective, but not either or.
Mm.
And then that takes us into intention, because of everything that happens in the mind, there being an intention behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you explore this issue of intention and astrology?
No, not really. I mean, basically, as I said, I was given the subject to talk about, and then I first of all said the tarot because I've been using the tarot for at least 20 years, if not longer. So there's a whole thing about, the magician in the tarot is to do with Mercury, and he's the master of his tools, and he's got one head up in heaven and one down on earth. To me, that is very relevant. It's very relevant for all astrologers because I believe that's what we are maybe we're practicing, always practicing, of bringing heaven down to earth. Yeah, and you're right, like you say, the dream world, incredibly important. And I know my first ever personal growth workshop ever, well, I went on a dream workshop in Spain. It was the only thing I wanted to go away on holiday. I was on my own, and it was advertised in a magazine at the time. And I'll do that. It was extraordinary. And my roommate actually came into my dreams at one point. Oh, I was so blown away. Great couple of leaders on that. And we were working every day on dreams. We were. And at one point, I got chosen, to be the focus person, whatever you want to call it. And it all got too in the head. It didn't work at all. But I do know there was a turning point where something happened magically. And I got a real revelation of a healing process. I did. To do with a dream. Our dreams are nightmares of a cat clawing into my into my tummy. It's really weird. And the facilitator said, "Oh, that's interesting." As people do. Oh, let's explore that. Yeah, and I had a healing dream as well as a result of this focus on dreams, the imagination, and a real healing at a deep level. So, you, what do you call that? I call that a miracle, a magic. You name it. It doesn't matter. It's been my experience. Up until then, I had never had a cat, apart from as a child, that allowed me to then, which I did, adopt two lovely pussycats as a result, because I had this fear. Cats clawing into me. It was actually symbolic of my mother. She had her claws in me. So that's what started my journey in personal growth, was to do with dreams. He has written a book, my facilitator. I don't know if you can buy it still. His name Robin Showett, his name was. So yeah, dreams, incredibly important. And often I have a nap in the afternoon, and that can often really deep ideas can come through. And I can, this afternoon I did exactly that. Yeah. So the whole thing about the imagination, that creativity, that other realm, astrology is totally part of that, as is psychology, of course.
Indeed. And the connection between myth and astrology immediately brings the imagination and, of course, the subconscious in there. You know, this is the stuff of psychological astrology.
Yes.
Well, it's the stuff of all astrology, but when we're thinking in this context, it brings to mind psychological astrology.
Mm-hmm.
Want to come back though to intention, because I think intention is really important. It's important in terms of magic, but it's also important because when we set a chart, whether we are doing it manually or by computer, we're having to tune in to the symbolism that is in front of us. And at first, when we start, it can feel quite mechanical because we're trying to remember the symbols and the meaning of the symbols and everything else. But there is a certain fluidity that happens when we become more confident and allow the symbols to speak to us in an intuitive way. Just an example of that was I did a reading for a client earlier this year, and I could see a Saturn transit coming up to her midheaven in Pisces. And I said to her, you know, perhaps it would be good for you to just check your insurance. She had a business, a cafe, for against flooding. Or I said, because there's just something here, some restriction around water coming up.
Right.
And I left it at that. I was thinking flooding. But at the same time, you know, I said it may not be that, but my imagination couldn't stretch to what that possibility might be. Well, about 2 months later, I get an email from her, and she says, well, she said, what you said about water, the water company have just informed us that they're switching off water to our street for 2 weeks.
Oh, no. Oh, God.
And she had a cafe.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right. Oh, yes.
So now she's, you know, she said, but I've been doing research because I thought I'd best do some research onto how I can get water from other sources and everything else. And I just thought, okay.
Brilliant. Lovely.
And it's that, isn't it?
Yes.
It feels like magic because you said the words and you don't know why. I mean, you know why from a mechanical point of view, but you're stretching into the possibilities, so that you can glean something that makes sense. And then, of course, comes the integration of that, which is, okay, so what is the symbolic meaning of this for you in your life? Yes, this happens here in this very tangible way. What is it it's about for you? And I think then comes the intention. What is the intention behind what you're trying to do?
Well, I would say always to be helpful is always my intention. And one thing I was reading today, I can't remember who it was, but yeah, I don't say, oh, a planet is good or bad. Yeah, I don't like those kind of labels, because they can scare people. I happen to have Jupiter in Capricorn. It's not extremely good, shall we say, because I have to work at my craft. And actually, I do know Bernadette Brady, I think, said it's a more spiritual dimension to Jupiter. But that whole thing about being very aware of the power as an astrologer that we can have in saying something that could really upset somebody. And I was looking at something that I think on your website about someone, they'd been to a palmist who'd given them a very negative reading. And yeah, exactly. Why on earth would they want to do that? It doesn't help. So to me, we are in a very important position as an astrologer, to be that teacher, stroke guide, and Liz Green, explain, like the priest even, priestess. Yeah, we are all things. And as such, we do have a responsibility to be of help as best we can. And I do know, I used to go to classes with Lindsay Rademacher, who was wonderful. I loved her so much. And one of the things that I learned from her was that you will make a mistake. And I was really heartened to hear from a top astrologer saying that to me. And sure enough, at one point in my life, I did. I was reading a chart and I realized after about maybe a quarter of an hour, it's the wrong time. It's the wrong chart. But everything I said to the client, she said yes. And I was in that place of, do I tell her I've just given you the wrong chart? No, I didn't tell her that. All I did was correct and carried on. And that advice from one top astrologer really meant something to me. Thank you, Lindsay.
Mistakes. I once did a chart, and it was for someone's child.
Oh.
It was a child, so this was a parent wanting a child. And I knew the parents and I knew both their charts very well. And I'm looking at this chart and I'm thinking, this chart does not look like the child that belongs to these two people.
Oh dear.
It was, and I kept looking at it thinking, this cannot be their child. There were so few correlations between that chart and the other charts that I knew well. And I just thought, I'm just going to check this data again. And I don't know how it had happened, but the birth date was correct. But the chart, the year should have been 30 years earlier, or it was 30 years earlier than it should have been.
Really?
So it had gone back in time.
Oh my goodness.
I did, but I did it. And so I said, I'm going to start again. I said, because,
that's weird.
This is a baby. This was a baby at this point. And so they weren't to know exactly. And because I had the correct birth date, many of the things that I was seeing were correct because I was talking about the sun sign.
Oh, right.
And so at that point, but as I was talking and as I was looking at that chart again, I was thinking, no, this isn't right. And so then I went back and checked. Um, I obviously hadn't really checked Pluto. If I had,
It would have been a clue.
it would have been a clue. In fact,
Yes.
that's what prompted me to check the year, because I suddenly thought, well, what are the other outer planets doing here?
Mm.
And I looked and I thought, oh, okay, that's it. So this was an informal reading. They just said, oh, could you have a look at the chart? And I
All
thought,
right.
so I hadn't had any time to actually prepare this,
Okay.
but there it was. So yes, there, mistakes,
Well, you could interpret it as a past life.
a past life, yes, essentially.
This being that now has come back into your life, you could have fibbed, but it sounds like they were okay with you.
Oh yeah, no, it was an impromptu thing where they said, "Oh,
Yes.
would you have a look?" And I thought, "Oh,
Yes.
let's have a look," um,
Yes.
and there it is.
Yeah.
So coming back then to intention, I think
Mm.
there's an elephant sitting in the room here, and that's horary astrology,
Mm-hmm.
because that I think could has some of the more recognized aspects of magic,
Mm-hmm.
because there is an intention. It is divination.
All right. Yes. Yeah. Asking a question.
And it's the question, and there are very, very clear rules about how
Mm.
the question is asked.
True. I do know. I have done a course, I think, a long time ago, with John Frawley. I do remember that. And I also, at one point, I was a advisor to a horse racing columnist. That was fascinating. He believed in astrology, thank God, and it was really interesting because, there you have the start of a race, don't you? And you can interpret, who's going to be the winner. And I was trying to find an astrology way of working with that. I can tell you, horses are all given the same birth date. I think it's April the 1st. So you can't use the date of the horse. There is, of course, the date of the jockey. That could be true if you could find it. But then the colours that the jockeys wear, that started me on, and I did bet last year on the Grand National, and I did win second place, not first, because of the name of the horse, and they was wearing black, and he got completely ignored by the commentators, this horse. And I went, anyhow, he came in second. I got my money back and a little bit of money. But that to me is partly horary, partly divination, partly looking at the symbols, looking at the colours. And that's one tip, I say,
That
for people.
that's very intriguing. Tell us more about this link between the colors and the astrology and how it worked.
Yeah. Well, he was wearing black. The jockey was wearing, it was a black horse, which was quite unusual. All right, it was. And also, I can't remember the name of the horse anymore now, but I can remember it just sounded Saturn. It had that quality. And the fact it's the Grand National, any horse can win, any horse. And he'd been ignored. He wasn't the favourite. No means was he the favourite. But that, again, that intuition that you mentioned, I went, I think that might work. I wish now I'd had it placed both ways. I would have won more money. I was so thrilled, to watch that race, to cheer that horse on. And he did. He came in second. He kind of came from the back. All of that. And as I said, I knew it was something to do with the planet Saturn.
Were you looking at a chart for that? For the timing of the
Grand
race?
National? You might have done, but it wasn't. The Grand National, truly any horse can win. And often I think the favourite got knocked out immediately. That's the whole joy of it, the pleasure of watching a horse race on TV. Well, I was cheering away, my horse was cheering away. And like I said, he came. He kind of kept on coming, very Saturn-like, very steady, and he made it to second place.
So if we went to
I didn't look at the chart as such. I didn't use that chart.
you didn't use the charts, so this was pure intuition.
Yes.
So coming back to working, for with this man who wrote about the horse races, what were you actually doing? Were you then looking at a chart for the time of the race?
Yes.
Okay, so you were looking at the chart for the
Oh,
time of,
yes.
were you framing it as an horary question, or were you just looking at the chart and getting hints from that? How did you actually do this?
Looking at the seventh house as the winner, absolutely. And then also, yeah, seeing horse racing doesn't actually normally start at the right time. Another problem, is it? Yeah. And then seeing, really getting involved in that chart is very true, very much so. And then looking at the jockey colours, what they were wearing, that became really important. It overrode anything else, no pun intended there. And I discovered going to the horse racing betting shop for the first time in my entire life was quite good fun. It's no longer, with men, cigarettes smoking away heavily. It was actually very, very fun, good fun. So he opened me up to a different realm, basically, of how you can use astrology for horse racing as such, and it can be fun. That was the whole point. I wasn't betting big amounts of money. Well, I did bet, I think, £75 once. I won £75 once. I think, and my tipster agreed with my comments, and so yes. But it wasn't a profession I would want to take up in seriousness. Yeah, I'm just sharing it as an anecdote of how you can get into, it is a ritual after all, isn't it? The beginning of the race, you're right, uh, who stands to win. A normal race, you don't have the problems like the Grand National, which any horse can win. Yeah, and they can get injured. Oh dear. All right. Okay.
Well, out of all the things that you might have brought up in this conversation, I
Mm-hmm.
have to say, it never crossed my mind that we would be talking about horse racing in relation to astrology. But I love it because I think it's also that element of play
Mm.
that comes into it where, and I think this is magic because we're pulling on different elements
Mm.
and we're testing the waters to see how can we use this, and
Mm-hmm.
what's okay and what's not okay. And
Mm.
it's that curiosity that we have when we first start learning astrology and we want to look at everybody's charts.
Oh yes. Oh,
you
yes.
know it it's it
Yes.
then it's okay, well, what else can we use this for? uh,
Mm-hmm.
and and checking on questions, and things like that when we start learning horary as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful thing to do, and there is definitely something of a ritual about getting, even with
Mm-hmm.
computers, putting the data in and sitting back and looking at the chart and allowing the chart to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Those,
Yes.
I once, I don't even remember, I think it was a strong 12th house.
Mm.
And I had, I suddenly thought about Joan of Arc with this chart.
Oh right.
It turns out that the person I was reading for was fascinated with Joan of Arc.
Interesting. Yeah. Yes.
You know, a very strong 12th house. Lots of people have a very strong 12th house. I've
Yes.
done countless charts for people with strong 12th houses.
Mm-hmm.
Why Joan of Arc for her particularly? Um, but it happened. And I thought, this is going beyond
Mm.
just the symbolism. It's the
I
symbolism
agree.
opening up the imagination
Mm-hmm.
right back to where we started. And it's when that happens, you know you're entering another realm, and it's magic.
I agree. I so agree. And one chart that I've been looking at recently is new Pope Leo. And I work with both Western and Vedic astrology. And his Western chart is all right. It's okay. But when I translate that, immediately that's what I will do. With any chart, I will look at the Vedic chart. Then you see his chart shining. He's got Mars and the Sun in Leo. He's called Pope Leo. He's got Mercury and Venus in he's got Mercury exalted in Virgo. He's got Saturn exalted in Libra. He's got Jupiter exalted in Cancer. I mean, excuse me, but this is a one special person. And his smile, he's got this beautiful smile. And people are guessing his rising sign. And I'm going, I see Venus. It's to me so obvious. He's sweet. That's what Venus is. It's sweet. And that's where I know. If only somebody could tell me his actual birth time, I'd be a very happy person. But even so, I can meditate on that particular chart of this particular person. And he's becoming really popular, and he's got a good sense of humor. He makes jokes, and you go, yeah, how wonderful. And when he was elected, I watched the film Conclave. I think a lot of people had. And Mercury in Vedic astrology had just moved into Aries. Exactly. Quick decision. Really fast. Mercury in Aries. So to me, I love using both systems, because then I can often get that magic from looking at the other point of view, the Vedic point of view, which I do believe is crucial to see both. And I know sometimes you think, I had a client last week on a workshop, very successful man, really successful. And I looked at his chart and I went, it can't be right. And sure enough, he said, I don't really know my birth time. I changed it by 2 hours. Now we can see his chart. He's singing, dancing, and he won all these gifts at some lottery or other. You go, yes, that's you. It has to work that way. And that's, to me, that's the magic of it.
Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it?
I mean, that the time is wrong. In your case, the year's wrong.
It's like me looking at that chart and thinking, this child cannot belong to these two people.
Had you said that, it could have been quite embarrassing.
Yes.
This is not your child. Thank goodness.
Well, it's thank you for a delightful conversation.
Likewise.
Exploring the links between astrology, imagination, and magic. Thank you very much, Pam.
Thank you very much for having me, Anna.
If people want to find you, how do they do that?
Well, my website is called healingstars.com. I've had it for a long, long time. I have. And I'm also about to teach again. I love teaching. I give workshops. So I'm about to teach something based on the planets. So that's my next venture.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you.
So people can find out all about that on your website, and I'll be putting a link to it in the description box. In the description box, you will also find links to my own website as well as my Substack. And next time, we are going to be looking at llamas. Until then, goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.